everybody, and welcome to Nerd Out. I am Alexandra Gaston, your host, and I am here with Taryn. Taryn, what are we going to nerd out about today?
Well, we're going to nerd out a little bit thing like beer.
Oh!
Yeah.
If it wasn't so early, it is early. We would have been imbibing.
I will correct you on that. The only time it's too early to drink beer is when you're not awake yet.
Yeah, but then you could get like a gastro tube or something, just steady stream.
That probably wouldn't be great. You don't want.
And why are we going to talk about beer today?
We're going to talk about beer today because it's about what my brain holds about 90% of the knowledge on.
Does it hold about 90% of beer as well?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And what kind of beers?
All kinds of beers. I probably should just talk about what got me into beer in the first place.
Yeah,
because that's a great place to start.
Start at the beginning.
So at the very beginning, it was a dark and stormy night.
Was it like around August time frame in 1992?
No, not quite. No, so beer and me go way back to college days, of course, like many of us.
Of course.
But getting into the craft beer scene was a little different. I made some friends that were a couple of years older, that were like further along in the engineering program at where I went to university. And we started doing, on Saturdays, we started home brewing. So we'd get together on a Saturday morning, we'd all supplies from the homebrew shop, your grain, your yeast, containers, your fermenters and all that stuff. And we would brew beer on a Saturday. And mostly it was an excuse to drink beer while making beer, but eventually it turned into a conversation about we actually enjoy this. This is a hobby. It's something that is creatively fulfilling because you're getting to mess with the different types of grain and the hops during the boil process. And so it started cultivating from just a conversation about what we were doing there, but to how does this become a career? How do you go from making it in your basement to doing it at a brewery? Mm-hmm. And so I graduated my engineering degree, went on and did that for a little while, and didn't like it. I didn't like being at a desk behind a spreadsheet, punching numbers, kind of trying to meet a bottom line that really didn't have any impact on me.
Didn't like working for the man.
Well, I wouldn't put it that way exactly.
I had to. I'm so sorry. We were going there. But no, I totally get that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so and it was great, and I was working, and I was doing well and felt great out of college, but it just wasn't for me. And I realized that I needed something a little bit more hands-on. Mm-hmm. And so I started looking into how to make beer for a living. And there's a couple of ways you can get into the industry. There's sort of working your way up the ladder. You can go in and work as a cellarman or in the kegging department. Really there's a lot of ways to get into it. Working, bar staff. A lot of those times, those can work into jobs in the other side of it. Mm-hmm. Or you can go in and get an education in it. And I wanted to fast track myself through the brewing industry. Okay. And actually went and got a master's degree in brewing science in Philadelphia at the University of the Sciences. Yeah.
That's intense, but I am in love. Keep going.
Yeah, so I quit my job in July of 2016 and was living in Philadelphia in August, moved myself out there, started the program. The program was a year long of classes, so it was a fall, spring, summer. And then the way that the program ends is you actually do an apprenticeship with a brewery, and you have to do all the legwork and find who you're going to do your apprenticeship with. I got lucky, and my sister was sorority mates with the person who was the new plant manager of the Guinness US site that was going in that fall. And so I ended up connecting through her.
I almost had a seizure. I'm so sorry. What
nope,
am I?
You're good. You're good. I'm just checking in on you.
I'm just having a seizure on set.
Yeah.
I got really excited. Guinness.
Freak dab.
Okay.
Yeah. So my sister made that connection, and then I actually got in through that a little bit, but obviously I had to go in an interview and still get to know the people that I was going to be working with and make a good impression on them.
Right.
So yeah, I was done with living in Philadelphia, so I was driving back to Kansas City and stopped in Baltimore, which was where the site is. Mm-hmm. and met the new head brewer, or the brewmaster there, Peter Wiens, who had actually worked in brewing for 20 years. He's owned his own brewery. He's worked for Budweiser for a long time. He's pretty much a titan of the industry at this point, and got to have a conversation with him and also Holly Stevenson, who was coming out of Ashland Brewing Company in Asheville, North Carolina, which was for a long time rated as like one of the top breweries in the U.S.
Right.
And so getting to work with those guys as like an entry-level apprentice brewer was phenomenal. We actually worked in the test brewery, so they were working on coming up with recipes that they were going to be doing when they got the full site up and running. So I got to watch the whole process of like, okay, we want to make this beer. How do we do that? And making like multiple batches of it. And I actually got to also work on the bar side of the brewery there. So I was working basically exactly from grain to glass. So I got to see every freaking step of the process.
That must be pretty surreal to like kind of see it being made and then watching it kind of progress and then just it's like you feel a little bit more connected to it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I really love about the industry and about making beer is it's every much as bit of a scientific process as it is a creative one and a creative outlet. And so that's what makes it so appealing to me is every day I know I go in, I work hands-on, I'm moving stuff along in the process, as well as when I'm done with it, I'm watching people enjoy it.
Right.
And getting like direct feedback and being able to like say like, okay, well this worked well, this didn't work well, but also when I'm designing recipes and coming up with like not new flavors, but new ways to like mess with styles of beer, it's so freeing to know that like there's places to come from. It's like homebrewing a world in D&D.
Right.
Yeah, it's you're basically getting to take all of these things that people have come up with and putting your own personal twist on it.
And you might not know this, but I work at this. It's the most random job, right? So it's a bike store. It sells like ching ching bikes, not like brum brum, not like cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool to them. And one of the things that they wanted to do is they wanted to create this store that had this atmosphere inside of it. So they built this cafe because the owner of the shop, like their husband, wanted to bring his home brewing process in. And so when I started on with this place, we just had coffees and, so we call ourselves breweristas because we both serve, beers and
coffee.
We're super cool. And so he set up all of his stuff in the back. And so I get to watch him and his assistant every day brew beer. They come in and they're boiling the water, the distilled water, the clear water, and they're bringing in the mash. They're graining everything out there. And then like it smells like potatoes for like the entire day.
Yeah,
and
French fries. People say French fries a lot.
6 coolers. And he's like, all right, we got to drop the temperature on this. And it's so interesting to see it happen. And the thought that goes into it and what he likes, and he's able to make these beers because he's got celiac. He's able to make these beers that are normally heavy in gluten. He's able to add an enzyme that breaks it down and makes it gluten-free.
Yeah.
And so now he's able to enjoy alongside everybody else, and nobody's the wiser.
Yeah.
And able to start to finish and name them what they are and explaining to people why they're named that. It's got something to do with bikes. Don't ask me, ask the people over there. I just know. And like getting to taste that and going, oh man, this batch, man, you nailed it on this batch. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. It's like going from, okay, this first beer that we did, we weren't keg hopping. Now we're keg hopping. And it's just adding that extra punch at the end and just experimenting with different styles of IPAs. So I totally get that. It's just, you really don't understand because I have worked in restaurants before.
Yeah.
I worked at a draft house. And you get to see the reps coming in from like Aslan and Right Proper, which are the ones that are in DC. Coming in and they're talking about the beers that they made, and sometimes it's just like, ooh, you missed the mark on this one. Like, or dude, I think you got to throw that keg out, it's skunked. But it was so different when you suddenly are in it and you're watching it happen, or it's a slow day and the boss man's in the back going, I need help, and you're going back there and you personally are helping with these beers, and you go, hey, you like that beer? I helped with that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love. It's so hands-on, and that's something that it makes it worthwhile every day I go into work. And one of the things I really enjoy about the industry, and just the fact that like one of the things I really get to focus on is not just so much like the brewing aspect, but also like bringing in a little bit of engineering, but also like focusing on like basically environmental conservation on an aspect of it. So one of the things that we do with our spent grain, which is, if you're not familiar with the brewing process, so like when you put the grain into the mash, you basically are converting all of the starches to sugars. You're using alpha amylase and beta amylase. You want a temperature range from 148 to 152, super wide.
Yeah.
That's Fahrenheit for anybody who doesn't, use Fahrenheit.
For us, for our non-American viewers.
Yeah.
That have the
in
metric
Celsius.
system, that's way cooler.
Yeah. Anyway, but so when you're done with that, basically you've pulled all of the sugar out of there, which is eventually what you're going to feed to the yeast, because that's what I am, a glorified yeast farmer.
Okay.
I like to put it that way, because like I make food for yeast and then I clean up after them.
I like
Yeah. So, but so when we're done with that, the spent grain, we actually will pull that out and we'll send it to a local farmer, and he actually feeds it to his cows. And so last summer was super dry in our area in Missouri. We actually were, he was able to not have to tap into any hay reserves because of the spent grain that we were using.
Oh, that's awesome.
So he was able to like kind of supplement the feed that he was getting for his cows without having to like go an extra step. As well, we do a lot of water conservation. Brewing, it does take a lot of water. But we do a lot of recycling with it. Like when I'm going through the chilling process, when I'm done with the actual brewing and I'm sending it over to the fermenter, it has to go through a cold crash process to make it ready for actual fermentation, because it's going from 200 degrees Fahrenheit to 68.
Yeah.
We actually send that water back over to our heating tank and can reuse it.
Oh,
So,
okay.
So it's not going to waste or anything. We're just sending it back over, and then I will probably, if I'm doing a couple of batches of brews a day, I'll use that water again, and it'll actually go into the next batch.
And now, is this like you specifically, or is it?
It's a pretty
Is that
industry.
something that's industry like normal, like that's starting to become across the board, that they're trying to be more conscientious?
It definitely, brewers, I mean, we understand that if we use up all of our water, we're not going to be able to like make beer, because like when
Beer's
it becomes,
important.
yeah, beer is important, but so is conserving our natural resources.
Right.
And so I think brewers are a pretty conscientious group, just because we have to be, with the fact that, one, we make a substance that can be abused.
Right.
And there's nothing more important than the safety of our customers and making sure that people are enjoying responsibly.
Right.
I think it's such an important thing to look at, and not just like let scroll by when you're watching a commercial about beer. Like it's a catchy phrase, but it's also something that's really important, not just for like consumers, but for us as well. And actually, one of the things that I really enjoy about the industry in that regard, I know we're jumping around topics.
No,
but,
dude, this is what we're here for.
there's a thing in the industry called Dry January,
Okay.
where everybody kind of starts the year fresh and doesn't imbibe.
Okay.
So it's kind of a way to like check in with yourself and others. Some people do February because it's only got 28 days.
Sneaky.
Yeah, but yeah, and I've since I've gotten into the industry, I've done that every January, and it's a good way to kind of check in and make sure that, just because I enjoy making beer and I really enjoy drinking beer, it's not something that I've become reliant on, or that is a crutch.
Right.
So, yeah, and I think just like from that perspective, being conscientious about that and being about our consumers and our customers, because one of the things we really look for is making people happy.
Yeah.
Because we're making a product that if people didn't enjoy, they wouldn't drink. Like it's not a necessity.
Yeah, they wouldn't spend money on it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So.
But I think probably on the flip side of that, one of the things I love about beer and the brewing are the people it brings in. Mm-hmm. Some of the coolest people I've ever met are always going to be at the brew houses. They're just really down to earth people that just thoroughly enjoy it. And I think it's important to have those kinds of people, because if you don't have somebody who's appreciating it, then it doesn't make what you're doing worthwhile.
Yeah.
And so it's just so awesome to be, and that's kind of one of the things that I've just been completely floored by the community in general that we're surrounded by, is just the constant, man, this is so good, or man, I really enjoyed this, you did great, nailed it. And that attaboy is like, we need to learn how to be able to not to go on without having that, but to have it just makes all the difference.
Sorry.
How dare you? Listen, we had to talk about these.
Yeah, I know.
But like, so we're talking about like the process of making the beers and what goes into it. But we haven't talked about what types of beers.
Okay.
So hit me, like, I know that it's hot, and probably we're into what, like the shandies, the kolsch's, the cream ale, something that's like light and crisp. Hit me. What's some stuff that you've been brewing up, and like, what are your kind of favorite types of beers?
Those are two very different questions.
Oh no.
So what we've been working on lately, and I actually probably should punch in the name of the brewery that I work for, just because, you know.
Yes, please.
So I work for Dubious Claims Brewing Company out of Excelsior Springs, Missouri. And one of the things that we just finished up was I just put on a cream ale. It's actually kind of like a citrus cream ale.
Okay.
So it's got like a nice like tartness to it, which works really well for the summer.
I came
good?
unplugged.
Oh,
I was
no.
moving too much. I was too excited. I'm too wiggly. Am I okay?
Sweet.
Thanks, Steve. You're
Technical
good. I'm the
difficulties.
one. I'm
No,
not
I
important.
know.
You're good.
It's fine. But yes, we did a cream ale. So actually, I've got a wit, a Belgian style wit, which is a Belgian wheat beer. Actually, and it's really depends on what you have, like yeast wise. At least that's what I use to dictate my brewing schedule, because I like to recirc the yeast. I'll use it about 3 to 5 times, just like repitching it basically, so that I get as much bang for my buck with it as possible. So when I was done with the runs of the wit beer, I looked at some Belgian styles and actually ended up brewing a Belgian triple.
Okay.
Which is 8.5%.
Yes.
Came out this summer. It's a little dark, but it's actually a really, really nice beer, and I've been enjoying it this summer for whatever reason. But it's got like I added some dark malts to it at the finish, so it's actually got like a roasted character.
Okay.
Which is not normal for a triple, but again, like we were talking about, kind of having fun with styles and things.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, there are a couple beers at the place where I'm like, it's probably closer to like a Pilsner than it's a cream ale, but
Yeah.
the process is still the same.
Yeah, and so like one of our mainstays is our Kolsch. Actually, our biggest seller is a blueberry wheat.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely very very summery, but I mean, we have it on all year round, and it's by far our biggest account outside of our location.
Does it have the color of the blueberry or no?
No, it's just it's a wheat beer, but it basically smells like a blueberry muffin.
Oh, don't talk about food.
But no, that's definitely like our big ticket item, because one, it's one of the beers we've had since we opened, and two, it's just it's not overwhelming on the blueberry note. So like people that enjoy wheat beers will enjoy it. People who like blueberry and a little bit more fruity can also enjoy it that way.
Yeah, I tend to always gravitate towards the fruity beers. I'm awful. I'm like one of those ones that like love sours. Dude, there's this raspberry sour that I had that just tasted like essentially like a raspberry lemon shot that I just was drinking all day. And they always have a little bit higher ABV value, so it's just like, but they're always like $12 a glass. It's gonna hurt you. It's gonna hurt you. You're gonna like it, but it's gonna hurt you to order it.
Yeah. And sours are interesting, especially with the prevalence coming up with kettle souring, which is what a lot of people do. So it's basically when you're going through the brewing process. So when you get done with the boil, you actually add lactobacillus into the boiling process, like right after it's done.
Right.
And you basically let it sit for 24 to 48 hours.
Because normally with the sour, it's added at the end.
Well, it's a secondary fermentation process.
Okay.
So after you get through the original fermentation, you will add the lactobacillus then and let it ferment in the fermenter. But what that does is that creates a possible point of contamination for your other beers and for the beers that are going to go in that tank later.
Because they just populate.
Yeah, lactobacillus is a bitch.
Yeah. They like to divide and conquer.
Yes, yeah, and which is with all bacteria. It loves sugar, and also yeast loves sugar, so if they get fighting over it, lactobacillus usually wins. So if you do it wrong, you can have sour beer for 6 months. But
I would be totally fine with this.
yeah, which is fine, but not great if you want to make beers other than sours. Which is where kettle souring comes in, which is usually what you'll see a lot of now in the smaller craft breweries.
Brews?
It's fine.
We haven't had any breweries this morning.
This
Is
is
that
all going.
tea?
No, it's an iced Americano, actually. But Emma gave me a look. Anyway, so kettle souring is basically when you're done with the actual like boiling process and you've got it all ready to go. You spend 24 to 48 hours of it with the lactobacillus in there, which does the initial souring part, and then you boil it again, killing off all the lactobacillus.
So it can't contaminate anybody else.
Yes. So, and then you transfer it over.
But it still has that same flavoring?
Yeah, it has that sour
Nice.
point to it. So, still haven't done that because I really just don't want to introduce lactobacillus to my brewery at all. Mainly because I
fair.
just don't want to risk it. But yeah, and that's one of the things actually I'll probably geek out.
Hey,
Sorry,
nerd out, geek out.
That's the spin-off show of this one.
Yes, that's tune in next week for our Do-si-Do show, Geek Out.
But so the last thing I'll nerd about is cleaning, actually.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm sure, based on what you've said about seeing all of the processes and stuff.
I usually try to hide when he's cleaning.
Yeah.
Because if I don't,
You
and
get
it's
roped
slow,
in.
I get roped into it, and I really don't want to stand there for 8 hours doing this with a keg.
Yeah.
While, and then, like, for like 20 minutes he had me do this. Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
my arms were shot. And
It's a great workout.
Todd, if you ever watch this, I don't like doing it.
Todd, keep it up. Actually, get a keg washer. You'll need it.
You've got one there, too.
I know, but it's funner to look over the one that you were talking to because it's like, hey, Todd. I'm just playing along. But no, so the one thing that people probably like would disillusion a lot of people about the brewing industry is it's 80% cleaning. So I was actually doing some math at one point. I know, crazy, right?
What? No, 2
math.
plus 2 does not equal beer.
Yeah. Was actually the fact that I do about 3 to 4 hours of cleaning per hour of brewing.
It's like school. Like you do 3 to 4 hours of
study for every 1 hour of class. Yeah.
And it's bullshit either way.
Yeah, but which actually it's something that if anybody actually wants to get into the brewing industry, you have to be aware of. But I enjoy it, and it's sort of like kind of traveled over in other parts of my life, like keeping things clean and like
Having it organized, I can imagine, is just
Yeah.
like it's stress reliever, getting everything ready, and then maybe at the same time your excitement's building because you're like, I'm on the last step, I can almost start brewing.
Yeah. So like it's a lot of prep work, but honestly, without all of that very attention to detail.
Attention to detail?
Yeah, that one. Without that, without all of that focus on cleaning, beer wouldn't be what it is. So,
That's true.
like, I mean, yeah, there's parts of it that people would really enjoy, wild fermentation, but I need to make clean beer, and I can't make clean beer if nothing's clean.
And you're not gonna have the best beer you can possibly have because you could have cross contamination.
Mm-hmm.
It might be like, oh, that's a note. This is like a fine Kolsch with a note of a lager. I don't understand.
Yeah.
And no, that's so. It's the same thing with arts. Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
having sometimes you can find beauty in the chaos, but like nothing kills the creative vibe more than where's my pen.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Is there anything that you would like to wrap up with us today about the brewing, about your love, a message to the people?
Drink more beer.
Drink safely more beer.
Yes, yeah, obviously. Yeah, just the one thing I think I'd like to leave off on is don't ever feel ashamed for what beer you like to drink. I know there's like this thing where people like to shit on drinking macros, or people are all up in arms about like this or that, or like people, oh well, hazy IPAs are bull crap, pastry stouts, what's that shit? But drink what you like, make what you like. It's all beer. We're all in the same. We're all in it together. World's going to shit, so might
just
as well
throw it
just
all
get
out
drunk.
and drink mead. Oh. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And thank you guys for tuning in and watching. As Darren says, just let people love what they love. And I hope to see you soon. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in this 5th of November. Give us a follow at Variant Rolls and myself at Crit Charisma for gunpowder plots and treason. I know of no better reason than View News for you to tune in next week when I sit down with V to talk craft and creations. And don't carry out your vendetta yet, as a Velvet Soiree starts soon at 8 p.m. See you next week.